there's a lot of fraudulent voting going on in this country.
Important warning. My mailman just confirmed that they all have officially been told to slow the mail down per Trump's Postmaster General. So, for mail-in ballots, send them 21 days early. Mail on October 13th. Do not wait. Retweet to spread this far and wide. He says that there is backed up mail all over the floor. He has never seen anything like it. It has already begun. But as long as we are keeping each other informed, we can beat their dirty tricks with information. I've seen other tweets from people who work from the Post.
I am everything the US empire hates right now. A transgender anarchist that supports Black Lives Matter and indigenous activists and resistance. I hold no shame in any of that, but this isn't about me. We're talking about the state and how it lies. Why would the state lie? Would the state have something to hide? Let's take a look at this Facebook post by the U.S. Department of State. Secretary Pompeo. Communists almost always lie. That's pretty McCarthyist language there. I thought we got past that.
Nope, just kidding.
The biggest lie that they tell us is that they think that they speak for 1.4 billion people who are surveilled, oppressed, and scared to speak out. Let's talk about Mike Pompeo, because he supported the NSA programs in 2013, saying that they were good work and important, and that any Muslim that didn't denounce terrorism at the time was themselves a terrorist. Mike Pompeo is also against shutting down Guantanamo Bay, and when they went on a hunger strike, he commented, "It looked like to me like a lot of them put on weight." I'm not one for fat shaming, but considering I'm a bulimia survivor, I mean, you're not any better looking yourself. He voted against legislation to end all secret prisons and abolish all torture laws under the Obama administration. In regards to Edward Snowden getting an interview here in the US, Pompeo said, quote, "I'm not sure there's a whole lot of change that needs to happen in the Espionage Act." Thus, he was wholeheartedly against Edward Snowden getting an interview on American soil. So it seems to me that not only is he in favor of surveilling people and oppressing people, but he's also in favor of making sure people are afraid of the state. It's almost as if he has a fetish for it. The people who run the US empire definitely have an agenda that they are trying to hide. Let's take a look at the Afghan War. It was orchestrated by the United States in order to get the Afghan guerrillas to fight the state communist USSR. All three administrations that led the war claimed that it was a winnable war and there was progress being made. Instead, the CIA traded opium with the Mujahideens as they gutted the Afghan economy of their education system to grow opium farms, to buy ammunitions and arms manufacture, to fight off the war against the USSR. When the war was over, however, there was no Marshall Plan from the United States, and guess who was a member of the Mujahideens? It was Osama bin Laden. So, yet, the attacks on September 11 and the war on drugs in not only the United States but also Afghanistan would have probably never happened if the CIA never traded drugs and arms manufacture with the Mujahideen guerrillas. The war on drugs itself is a fascinating phenomenon. According to this book, The Politics of Injustice, Crime, and Punishment in America, the war on drugs actually began when the illegal use of drugs was actually on the decline. The United States prison population is 750 out of 100,000, compared to Germany, which is 93 out of 100,000.
During the same time period, however, a war on drugs was declared, causing arrests and convictions for drugs offenses to skyrocket, especially amongst people of color. What the fuck?
Let's take a look at the police system in the United States. In Fresno, California, this police officer pulls over a man for no reason. He claims that his lights aren't working, yet they are working. The man pulls out paperwork proving that he's been stopped for this before and claims that he's being harassed by the local police. He follows up by saying that he wants the police citation so that he can sue the police department. Smart move, my friend.
Heath White, check your privilege.
Let us observe just one Black Lives Matter protest on the map of the United States. Just one out of the many. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, protesters stood in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd. The people assembled to be met with riot police, shooting lethal rounds and tear gas.
So at this point, the cops have pretty well gotten most of us to both intersections. We really couldn't tell what was going on at the other end of the block. There was so much smoke. Some of the protesters had rainbow spots, and that was cool for like a couple of minutes until they started firing gas cartridges. They got a girl, she's so young, and she fell and they kept firing on her. And by then it was still light. So by 8, it was supposed to be over by then. Didn't you finish your protest? Go home. They said they'd start arresting us, and then they started driving us away from the courthouse. And this is the part I don't understand. Because one of two things happened last night. Either the militarized police force of the city of 275,000 people was so clueless, had no plan, had no strategy, that they thought the best thing to get this thing over with was to disperse us into the city, was to force us deeper into the city and to scatter. They're either so grossly incompetent that they thought that was a good idea, or they did it on purpose because they wanted a riot. Because how you get a riot is by forcing people to scatter and go deeper. You take away any rule of law. Why wouldn't some angry teenage kid smash a window and you just sent us running for our lives in the city we live in? I've been in the street so many times. When Trump was elected, we went to Indianapolis and took this whole fucking city for a couple hours. Let us take the whole thing. We just wandered around. It was great. This wasn't a protest. It was a trap. No matter what we would have done, we could have been perfect and they would have come out like they did. And we have to figure out right now, all of us together, where we live. We have to figure out how to make them stop. And we have to get serious about taking care of each other. Because it's better. We have to make socialism. They're choosing farmers. And too many of our neighbors are willing to let them do.
And that's just one protest out of many protests across the country. The U.S. Department of State is definitely lying to us thus far claiming that it's not an apparatus of surveillance, oppression, and getting people to be afraid of speaking out against the state. Let us not kid ourselves. The only people the state wants speaking up in this marketplace of ideas are those that support this fascist regime. They want people waving the thin blue line out loud, proudly, in solidarity with law enforcement, unconditionally. And sure, you'll get that one Karen who says some are a few bad apples. But what good is that when her husband is a racist bigot himself? These people are not only licking the boot, but they are the first to defend law enforcement at a protest. They are the first to confront you when you are protesting for black life and indigenous resistance. The police will be the first ones to arrest you afterwards, and I bring this up because when protesters assemble against ICE at detention centers on the border, it's usually the Proud Boys who are the counter-protesters. This is why leftists need to be ready to confront these hate groups essentially when at a detention center. Now let me tell you what the state doesn't tell you, however, and that is there is a new Netflix series that is being censored by the Trump administration and ICE called Immigration Nation. That's pretty Pravda to me.
What, Christina, tell me about the problems. What does the legal threat from the administration look like?
You know, for 2.5 years, we had incredible access. And for that, we're grateful to the men and women of ICE for showing us a very honest picture that I think has never been shown before. But in order to get that access, we had to sign a contract called the Multimedia Agreement. It's a common contract for people working with DHS to sign. And at the end of that process, we had to show the tape to them under the condition that factual inaccuracies and what is called police enforcement sensitivities, meaning if they're using a certain tactic that would give away their work, would be, you know, they would have authorized to ask for changes. Unfortunately, when the review process began, they asked for a lot more changes than that. And we pushed back and said, no, you may not editorialize the show. And this is not the way the contract works. And when that got worse, we kind of got bullied and threatened for a while. And eventually there was some delay of time games. And eventually they even asked, tried to pin us to releasing the show in November. I think the good news is that the show is the show we intended to do. The show, you know, our First Amendment right won, and I'm happy that people will get to see it as it was intended.
It's a documentary series that shows the rear underbelly of the concentration camps of the U.S. Empire. It shows children crying from their parents being separated, ICE police using twisted logics to rationalize their occupation, brutal police violence, explicit American nationalism to demonstrate the fascist Trump regime. It's all there, folks. It's literally a 6-episode series to pull your heartstrings and get you to fully be aware of what is going on in these camps if you weren't already, and Trump and ICE are trying to censor it. It's no wonder that Willem von Bronson did what she did. Let's talk about Trump's behavior. He's virulently against Black Lives Matter, anarchists, and Antifa, calling all 3 of them thugs or terrorist organizations. The thing his followers are misinformed about is that Black Lives Matter, anarchism, and anti-fascism are not organizations, but they're ideologies. Black Lives Matter is based on the ideology that black people ought to be humanized under a settler colonial system that has racially segregated and objectified them for many centuries. Anarchism is a concept that abolishes all unjustified hierarchies and questions unjustified authority whenever it arises. Anti-fascism, on the other hand, is an intersectional ideology that confronts fascist and reactionary tendencies within the community, keeping the community safe from racial violence, bigotry, and hate. So each of these components are essential to a healthy society because they illustrate each component to a crucial critical thinking and practice for the benefit and sake of a community, not for the state or for your leader. If Trump is really going to try to spread misinformation on anti-fascism, he may as well confront the United Nations, who recently announced that they are concerned that the US is labeling Antifa as a terrorist organization.
It undermines the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly within the country.
Get up, get up, get up. Get up. Get up, get up, get up. Get up, get up, get up. Get up, get up. Do you really think the state is working within our interest? Unless you're a settler, landowner, or own capital, you're an enemy of the state. Don't believe me? In Los Angeles, sheriff deputies are processing almost 1,000 eviction orders. It's ironic that the name of this landlord in this article is Dennis Block or Mr. Block. But have we found a cure yet? In countries like Vietnam and Cuba, socialist countries, they found treatments for it. In Spain and Russia, they contained it. In the US, it's at an all-time high, spiking. What is the news on it here in the
President
US?
Trump is drawing fire for his comments about the rising death toll from coronavirus. With more than 1,000 Americans dying every day, the president said, "It is what it is." Democrats have already turned that phrase into a campaign ad to lambast his leadership. We get more now from CBS's Paula Reed at the White House.
With the virus costing over 1,000 American lives per day, President Trump continues to maintain the pandemic is under control, most recently in an interview on HBO.
What's your definition of control? Yeah. Under the
it's giving them a false sense of security.
Now, I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
Trump, honey, you're gonna need to hurry up and what yourself, you old fuck, because it is what it is. You have a popularity rate of 12%. You can't run this country. In fact, if you're so afraid of black, indigenous, anarchist, communist, and anti-fascist leadership in the resistance, maybe that's what our future should entail when you're no longer with us. I'm just thinking outside the box. I say this is in hope of getting others watching. Even if you're stuck at home, you should be active and to do something against the US empire and the capitalist white supremacist power structure that oppresses people around the world. I hope that this video was helpful for you, and feel free to subscribe and comment and share it. I have a Patreon again, and it works. My first Patreon was Darren Drin with the Comrade tier. Hit up my Patreon and support me, please. I would love that. Thank you. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.